All right, good morning, everyone, live audience, and those who will be watching this recording later on. Hello, and welcome to Mondays with Manny. I'm your host, Manny Rodriguez, and this live cast is about discussing common problems organizations face and how to deal with them using the science of human behavior. Special thanks goes out to Business Science Magazine, 305 Publishing, as well as the OBM Alliance, and of course my teammates at Bueno Ventures. We'll be taking questions from the live audience following the presentation. However, the Q&A portion will not be recorded, so that's only for those who join us live. So thank you for those who have joined us live. Today I have a special guest, as you can probably see, Amanda Barnett. Amanda, say hi.
Hello.
And Amanda joins us all the way from the great state of North Carolina. And today's topic is very special. We're going to talk about self-management, which we'll get into why that's such a special topic in today's day and age, right? There's a lot of things we could talk about with regards to self-management, given what's going on in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So without further ado, this is Mondays with Manny. It's about 20-30 minutes in length. We are recording this. The live Q&A again will be at the end only for those who joined us live. So thank you those who joined us live, and away we go. So Amanda, Mondays with Manny, I don't really do like introductions to our authors. We'll put your name, your LinkedIn profile. People can see who you are and whatever, and what you do. But if you could give us the elevator pitch about Amanda Barnett today. What is it that you do? Why do you work? What do you do in North Carolina? And just kind of give us the quick introduction.
Perfect. Well, I work with a fractional HR team at PREMACK. I'm a consultant there, and I also do some own independent things as well. And what I do is I use behavior science in business practices, and what that might look like is, in a nutshell, aligning team member behaviors with the mission and values of a business. And I go about that in about 4 different ways. So I might analyze the system that performers are working in, making sure departments can talk to each other, and if there's some hiccups there, we can help solve them. We also are really good at measuring behavior and seeing and analyzing the environment. So if there is, let's say, a performer issue and a couple people that are having some issues, we have a diagnostic tool that can help assess the environment, and we can teach that to leaders so that way they can better, think of interventions that can meet the root cause of what's going on besides, let's say, the 5 whys. So it looks at different factors that might not be considered. So how are we providing feedback? Is it specific? Things of that nature, which gets into my next point, that some of the things that I might do and that I'm getting into that you're actually helping me out with is behavior-based safety. And so making sure that people are being safe in the environment. We're building a safe culture, especially in this time and age where we're talking about COVID-19. What does that really mean for safety? And, are we washing our hands, and how do we motivate people to do these sorts of things? So in a nutshell, I was going to rattle off some more, but just for time's sake, that's just in a nutshell some of the things I do.
And so it's an impressive list. So let's kind of drill down into our subject matter and try to tie some of those pieces together. So our subject matter today is self-management, right? And so our audience today, Mondays with Manny's audience, just like Business Science Magazine's audience, it's a wide audience, the business audience. It's kind of a mix of practitioners in the science of human behavior as well as consumers of the science of human behavior, meaning the everyday business person, right? So self-management, kind of break it down for us. You've been studying this topic for a long time. You know this topic well. You could probably talk about it in your sleep. So what do we mean by self-management?
Yeah, so there's a couple different definitions out there. So I try to go with the one that I think makes the most sense depending on our audience, and that not everybody's a behavior analyst here. And really, it's just that finding that self-control and the ability to take controls of one work, care, well-being. More specifically, if we're going to drill that down, that might be financial health, emotional and mental health, stress management, physical health. And today specifically, I wanted to focus on productivity and what that's like in the home. And one of the things I prepared to talk about is actually if you have kids, how to handle that. If you have animals that bark, how to handle that, all kinds of things that we're having to face. If you have, in my case, a significant other at home working, and it is amazing, and I am so excited to have them nearby, but also comes with its own challenges. So how do we handle that? So these are all things that we're kind of thrown into the mix that we need to really, figure out how are things different and how we might actually need to adjust our own behavior, so that way we can, just continue to be successful.
All right, so let's break down a couple of things. So you mentioned, you mentioned like helping you with productivity and distractions, and so
Mm-hmm.
let's point out the fact that today is March 23rd, right? And there is the coronavirus is going on in our world today, and a lot of people are being sent home and working from home more in more numbers now than ever before, according to some latest statistics. So self-management seems to be pretty appropriate as a topic for us to talk about, given what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
how would you apply, like, what advice would you give to people who are working from home in regards to self-management to be productive, avoid those
Mm-hmm.
distractions, um, and but also for those who are new to the working at home environment? So, how would self-management kick in? What would be like some of your advice off right from the beginning?
Yeah, and please let me know if I'm talking too loud, because I try to test out my volume of my voice,
You're doing
and I
fine.
just at some point I might be really quiet, and I also don't want to all of a sudden start yelling because I'm
You're,
excited.
you're
So
doing fine. You're doing fine. You're doing
yeah.
fine.
So the first thing is really just to take data, and so this is going to be, across. We do this related to specifically time, and I think it's so easy to do this for finances, and we think about our budget and how we track our bills and income. When we're looking at our diets, we might track our calorie intake or our exercise, but a lot of times people don't really track how much time we're spending on certain things. And so for example, how many of you can tell me your most productive time during the day?
Mm.
And yeah, a lot of people don't know. For me, I had that question posed to me by Natalie Parks, and she's phenomenal. I'm going to do a little plug here for leadership and behavior analysis. That course is absolutely awesome. And so some of this content I'm going to talk about is actually from there and a couple other resources. For me, I would say between 1 and 3 is when I'm most productive. For my husband, it's from like 8 a.m. till I would say like noon. He's just a powerhouse. So knowing these little nuances are really important for our conversations, and where we position ourselves in our house, who's going to take up the office and when, all these sorts of things. So there's a couple ways to track time. Um, I've seen some that are incredibly overwhelming that I'll just throw out there. I don't recommend them. But one is like old fashioned pen and paper, just write down everything you're doing. I don't have time for that. Like tracking time and doing it to that extent sounds crazy to me. So what I try to do is chunk it into 30 minutes. Behavior analysts actually know what type of time sampling this is, but I don't want to get too technical. So I chuck it into 30 minutes, and then I just say, what is it that I'm doing? And I note that. There are some productivity trackers online like Toggle, and there's also other resources too, like journaling. So one thing I did want to touch on is just stress and anxiety. I do have a background where I used to work on that extensively as a mental health therapist. And so one of the things we encourage people to do is really think about their triggers, journal about that. This is kind of the same thing of just take data. Data is just data. It can tell you a little bit more to a story, so that way we know how to respond.
All right. So you mentioned taking data, on time. Is there what other things would when I thought about self management in regards to like my own behavior, I definitely track time. I don't know. I shook my head because I don't know when I'm most productive, because I think it varies between Monday through Friday and definitely
Yes.
Saturday and Sunday. I'm very
Hmm.
different in different days. But
Yes, absolutely.
I wish I had a pattern. I don't. My graph would be like crazy. But
Yeah.
but one of the things that I have realized around self-management is also tracking the things I accomplish. So any thoughts
Absolutely.
around tracking things that you accomplish during a day or
Mhm.
a week?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you talked about that because that's actually the number two thing I was going to list. I prepared for this like crazy, and so there's like a list of 10 things I wrote out
All right, that's
that I'm
okay.
going to share in an article, probably in Business Science magazine. But
Okay, cool.
um, yeah, yeah. So a little personal plug there. But for so a lot of people will default to dos, and one of the things that as behavior analysts we know is that if something's really really long and it seems very cumbersome, we're going to be less likely to do it.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things that I really appreciate about a behavior science approach. So really look at, instead of having this long to-do list that seems never ending, let's instead follow a rule that's basically a 1-3-5 rule. So what's one big thing that we can do today? What are three medium things that we can do? And what are five little things that we can do? So
Oh,
that breaks it down. Yeah, that's also from Leva. So just gonna throw that out there. So I didn't make this stuff up. It came from Natalie, and probably
fine.
Adam as well. But so for me, what that looks like today, I include meetings. So this is one of them. My big thing today that I'm going to do is finishing up a PTO policy and a handbook for one of our businesses. And a medium thing related to this is we have a call with them at 3 p.m. Where we're going to talk about grants for small businesses and also small business loans for COVID-19. So one thing that I also want to do is maybe think about sharing resources for anybody who hasn't gone on my LinkedIn page. Please do so, because there's a lot of small business and personal things that people can do and access during this time that they might not know. So emergency resources, unemployment, and PerformMentor did an incredible job. We just came together as a team. Maureen's actually on it, so I just love working with this team. And we're pulling together and we're helping people out, getting the information they need so that way they can pay their bills. If it's helping keep a business afloat this weekend, I helped a couple businesses that might be a considered emergency or necessity apply for what that might look like. So anyways, I digress. That's a medium thing to do, is just helping out these businesses. And little things that I'm going to do is check my email and Slack. So those are some good examples of what that might look like.
So
Yeah.
with all the client work that you do, I mean, you have a variety of different clients in different industries.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is some of the biggest challenges with regards to self-management, and what would you what do you recommend to solve those challenges?
Absolutely. So great question. So this kind of goes back to the data and seeing when you're least productive and most productive, and then analyzing it a little bit. So one thing that I can almost guarantee is that we have distractions. And so limit distractions. That's going to be notifications. I'm going to hold up my phone here. My phone is on silent currently. So I'm practicing self-management because I turned off my Slack notifications, my phone, social media notifications, so I can be totally in tune and focused during this conversation.
That's good.
Because I think we've all been there. I got a notification. I'm in my phone. 20 minutes later, I'm in a dark hole of like on social media of like, where am I and why am I watching this video? I'm like
Yeah.
making cheese. I don't know. So limit distractions. Also working from home, that might be environmental things. So if it's laundry is piling up or dishes, let's get up a little early, knock those things out so you're not having to attend to them or it's distracting you.
Hmm.
The other thing with the physical environment is just making it more pleasant. So, for example, here I'm sitting in a big comfy chair. My husband hates it. He has his own chair next to me. So it's these little nuances that can make sure that we're a little bit more comfortable in our environment. So we're going to be more likely to stay there and be productive. So I think Skinner has an example of B.F. Skinner, for those of you who might not know who I'm talking about, but he's one of the founders of behavior analysis to a certain extent. And he was really good at analyzing his own environment and behavior. And he noticed he was very distracted if he had an uncomfortable chair. He reworked it, he ripped it apart, and then he found that he was able to focus on his writing and spend an extra hour or two on it. So little things like that can go a long way. And then just keep your routine. So a lot of times when we're working from home, and I fall victim to this of wearing pajamas all day, and then it's what I can say, if I'm tracking my own self, I'm actually much more productive. If I'm showered, I get up, I eat breakfast, I'm keeping that consistent routine. For those of you who have kids, you know routine's important in how things go cray cray, when it's not, they're not following a routine. And so, do that for yourself as well. And, for example, you know, it limits the amount of decisions you have to make, but it also makes it so you can have a habit. So like Steve Jobs, for example, there's a reason why he wore the same outfit every day. It was one less decision he had to make. He was able to move through that a lot faster, and then he could focus his energy on making more decisions. So I'm going to stop right there because I sent you a lot of information. I
No,
have a lot more things to talk about, but I'll turn it back to you.
well, no, all of these tips are great, and in fact, just so you know, what I do is right after we stop recording, when I go into the editing mode, which
Mm-hmm.
takes about a couple of days, I usually splash, a sentence or less of these tips that you're talking about. Any resources that you provide will be splashed on the screen, and then we'll put them in the post with the video on YouTube. So all of these are great; they won't be lost at all. And so just in terms of it's we've been at this for about 20 minutes now, so I want to
Oh
just kind
God,
of,
it's gone by so fast.
it goes by really fast,
Yeah.
and so I want to kind of send people. I want to get people to start thinking, right? So whatever, if they're doing something, if they want to do something around self-management, whatever it is,
Yes.
whether it's their work, um, or whether it's their health, their family, whatever. Um, if they needed to get started, right? If they, and you may have already said it, you may be reinforcing what you've already said, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to kind of get people started with all the craziness in the world.
Yeah.
If you, in regards to self-management, let's kind of bounce this off each other. Like if
Okay.
each of us give two pieces of advice on how to get started with self-management, what two pieces of advice would each of us give them, right? Give to this audience.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kick it off, right? I'll start,
Sure.
right? And I won't cheat and use one of your already brilliant ideas. So
Okay.
I'll try not to anyway. So you mentioned the to-do list. My advice to people is to create a get it done list.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is a little bit different because to-dos are about activities.
Mm-hmm.
A get it done is about the outcome, right? So,
Yeah.
so that way your to-dos are to-dones, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's an expression that I learned from something called Entrepreneurial Operating System (EOS) from a guy named Gino Wickman, and it was all about how to get your to-dos to dones, and it was all about focusing on the outcome as opposed to the activity. So, like, if you had a to-do list that said call Joe, all right, well, why are you calling Joe? Well, call
Mm-hmm.
Joe to get the information you need. Okay, well, that's more of an outcome. You got the information you needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a little bit of a nuance, but it's all about getting those accomplishments. And
Yes.
that would be my tip number 1 out of 2, is to
Mm-hmm.
kind of look at your to-do list, if you use to-do lists, and look at it to be a to-done list. So what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve in each one of those things? All right,
Mm-hmm.
so that's my one. What's your one?
Yeah. I'm gonna piggyback off of that actually. And when we're looking at the things that we have to knock out, looking at first deadlines, when do you need to get it done? If somebody hasn't given you a deadline, ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure that you're very transparent about what you have actively going on as well. So you can be realistic with your time. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of goes back to my first point, take data so you can be realistic and you actually know your bandwidth. And then assign things urgent and then important. And I want to make sure that anything that's urgent, I tackle that day. So that's going to be things that you want to do within the day or the next few weeks. Important's going to be, I need to keep this, and complete it within the next few weeks to month. And that's really going to, if you decipher it and you follow the 1-3-5 rule, it's really going to make you mindful about what is it do I have to do today? So you're not spending time on things that might be more fun to do, but don't really move the needle in the direction you need to go to be preventative with your, and knocking out big projects. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so that was a good tip. Good couple of tips there, and you squeezed in into one. I like it. So
I know I do that.
I'm gonna
All
do.
these little bits.
That's
Yeah.
all right. I love it. I love it. So here's my tip number two. My tip number two is a little bit we haven't talked about yet, but it's around accountability. So it's kind of
Mhm.
a little bit of a twist, right? Self management is about managing yourself. But in order
Yes.
for you to, in my experience anyway, in order for you to effectively manage yourself, you actually have to have accountability towards what you're managing of yourself. So getting feedback from colleagues, from family, like how are you doing on your like are you even being recognized for the stuff that you're working on, you know? so
Yes.
so an easy example is weight loss and getting fit, right? So
Mhm.
I spent the last couple of years just going to the gym and trying to kill it and lose a bunch of weight. And I'm very fortunate and happy that I did. But it wasn't without a lot of self management as well as a lot of accountability from people at the gym who used to tell me how lazy I was that I wasn't there for 3 days versus when I was at the gym giving me feedback on how I was doing. And then, of course,
Mhm.
people in my daily life telling me like, "Oh, you're looking great. You've lost weight. You're eating good." You know, all those kind of things. So it was really getting that accountability in there to reinforce all of these different self-management things that I was working on, even if
Mhm.
they didn't know all of it. They knew
Mhm.
some of it. They knew enough to know what to reinforce and what I was looking for. So that
Mhm.
accountability system in the workplace, I think, is absolutely critical. You're self-managing all these different activities you're doing, all the urgent and important stuff, and you want to
Mhm.
make sure that they get acknowledged because if you get it done and nobody actually pays attention,
Yep.
then 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 there's a little bit of a loss there, you know, even if you reinforce yourself to the best extent you can. Having that accountability system of everything you're working on is really important. So that's
Yes.
my tip number two. What's your tip number two, Amanda?
Yeah. And just before I get into my tip number two, I want to add that I love your talking about that. And as a manager, if you're finding yourself working remotely, I like to use Slack. I like to use, we use video conferencing like Zoom, and making sure that even if you're not in the work environment where you can see that they're actively working on something, really think about what is it that you want that person to do and making sure you're following up, just like
Uh,
what you said. Hey, I really love how you knocked out X, Y, or Z. That's going to really keep that team motivated, especially if you're working remotely together. So I love that. That's awesome. So I would say, I wish I could do like a two for one right now.
Go ahead.
um,
Go ahead.
but
There's no rules.
I would say to a certain extent, I talked about keeping your routine, but even more importantly, I think is what you call in behavior science is behavioral momentum and the PREMACK principle.
Mm,
So making sure that if there's a task that that you don't really enjoy, it's an energy sucker. Let's make sure that we're building up some momentum. So that might be for me, honestly, drinking coffee. It might be checking my work emails, and then let's say having a small check-in, that medium thing that I listed earlier, knocking that out, and then diving into the bigger to do. And I'm also going to maximize that time. If I'm most productive from 1 to 3, depending on how many distractions I have going on, then I'm going to schedule that big thing, to do during that time when I'm in the zone, quote unquote.
I love it.
Um, the other one is the PREMACK principle. What this actually means is just we do this all the time with our kids. It's like, oh, you can have dessert after you eat your vegetables. So it's just, if you get through something that was really, let's say, tedious, or that energy sucker, followed up with a break or something that you really enjoy. So that way you kind of give yourself like, hey, a little pat on the back, like I did it. That was great. So that way you can keep that motivation going on. And I could keep going, but I'm going to stop right there.
All right. I love it. I
Yeah.
love how you spiced in some behavioral science in there and how applicable it was to what we're talking about.
Yes.
So, Amanda, I'm going to wrap us up for today. Today's Mondays with Manny. This is Amanda BARNETT, folks, an OBM practitioner extraordinaire and a fine representative of Perform Mentor. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
splashing Perform
Thank
Mentor's website
you.
on the screen. Her and her colleagues are doing some dynamic work all across the United States, probably even outside of the United States, although I don't know that for sure. But they're doing some phenomenal work,
Mhm.
and please check them out. Performmentor.biz, right? .biz,
Yes,
and
that is right. And then can I just throw in 3 quick things if you have kids, what to do, dogs, all that kind of stuff, because I alluded to that. I'm sure people are just, if I think about my friends, I really want to make sure to get this message out. I'll
Go
keep it
ahead.
succinct because
Do
I
it.
know for time.
Do it.
And your kids might, in fact, come inside.
I like the door.
Yeah, here we go. Hey, yeah, you lock the door. So one of the things I used to do when I was a therapist in school is kids had a hard time knowing when you're available versus not. And this can happen a lot if you're having, let's say, meetings like this where you're having to be on video. And so for school age kids, I would say, use a red type of signal on the door if you're not available, and a green signal on the door if you are available, but you have to teach it to them because they could be like, I don't know what this means, and they can stroll on in, so also lock the door. So one of the things when I used to do this is I would make it fun and play red light, green light to a certain extent with the kids. And I say, okay, think of a fun skill that you want to teach me. Okay, gotta look at the door. Is it green or red? And then you can make it really fun. And so then the kids know when you're available versus not, but it comes back to your point, Manny, you have to follow through. Otherwise the kids are gonna be like, oh, it doesn't matter. I can just bust on in and they're gonna give me attention or whatever it might be. Or everything's an emergency, even if it's a glass of water. So that can really help with that. So make sure if you teach it, you stick to it and try to make it fun. The other thing is, this is a little plug for one of my friends, Great Minds. They have free lessons right now, and it's what teachers use for academia. So you can log in, it's great content, and also Spangler Science. So, those are fun activities to keep your kids occupied, so they're going to be less likely to knock on your door. And if you have a toddler, sprinkle favorite toys around, note like what things they do independently, any snacks that they like, just kind of throw them out in the, so they can access them, but maybe not too easily. And then that will keep them entertained so they can be a little bit more independent while you're working on something that might need a little bit more, let's say, energy. And last but not least, teenagers. I talked about the PREMACK principle. It works well with teenagers. Figure out the schedule, what you want them to do, help them make that with you, and then figure out what their reinforcer is. If you have pets, I have a dog that likes to bark, so I'm going to minimize distractions. I know he likes to bark if the doorbell rings, so I'm going to make sure that I have him kind of next to me because he's less likely to bark if I'm holding on to him and petting him when he's not barking. So guess what? He's actually in here right now. And so, yeah, we're going to make sure that I'm doing that. And then the last one, I talked about this, significant other at home. But the conversations my husband and I have is if he needs a video chat, he actually had to be on one right now, but our internet bandwidth won't allow for it. So we planned ahead and we talked about, who's going to be on when and why. And we also make sure we schedule our office time so that way we can be productive for the both of us. The other thing that we're doing, because we're in the same environment and we're around each other all the time, is thinking about how we show appreciation and what is one thing we can do to show appreciation to our significant other, and making sure that we're just kind of following it up. Like during this time, how do we want to be and what are we doing daily to make sure that aligns with that value?
Wow, these are all great tips, Amanda.
Thank you.
I gotta say congratulations because it's working, obviously, because if anybody's noticing, that dog has not barked one time. And
he's actually sleeping right now. He's good.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
All right, so this is Amanda BARNETT from Perform Mentor. The website's on the screen. I really appreciate you, Amanda, very much. Thank you very much for joining me and talking about this important topic called self-management. So at this point, we're going to conclude Mondays with Manny. We're going to end recording. Say goodbye, Amanda, to the
Bye.
recording. And for those in the live audience, stick around. We're going to do a live Q&A.